You know that feeling of déjà vu? That strange, nagging sense that you've seen this all play out before? Well, right now, in the global silver market, a pattern that has emerged only 3 times in the last 100 years looks like it's unfolding once again. And you should know, each time this pattern appeared, the result for the price of silver was, well, nothing short of explosive. So let's dig in and uncover what's really going on beneath the surface.
I want you to just look at this number for a moment. 86%. By itself, it's just a figure on a screen, right? It doesn't mean a whole lot. But when you attach it to one of the largest, most important commodity hubs on the entire planet, it becomes a massive flashing red warning signal.
You see, that 86%, that represents the colossal drain of publicly reported silver inventories in China. We're talking about warehouses that were once brimming with thousands of tons of physical silver, and they are now being drawn down at an absolutely shocking rate. It begs the central question, the one that everyone should be asking: where did all of that physical metal actually go? And maybe more importantly, why is it vanishing so incredibly fast?
Now, this isn't some random event. It's not happening in a vacuum. What we're witnessing, I believe, is the inevitable result of 2 incredibly powerful forces clashing head-on. On one side, you have a historic, almost unprecedented surge in real-world demand for physical silver. And on the other, you have the complex, highly leveraged world of paper contracts, the financial instruments that only promise to deliver that silver. It's a tale of 2 realities, and they are on a collision course.
So first, let's talk about the demand side of the equation, because this is not your grandfather's silver market, not even close. We are seeing absolutely staggering levels of industrial consumption coming from the very technologies that are defining our future. Think about it. Every single solar panel needs silver to function. Every electric vehicle has silver in its components. Every 5G tower, every single AI data center, they all require physical silver. This isn't just about coins or jewelry anymore. Silver has become one of the indispensable building blocks of the modern world, and the scale of this new demand is something the market has never, ever seen before.
And here is the direct result of that demand. This chart tells a very simple but very powerful story. For the 5th year in a row, the world is using far, far more silver than all the mines on Earth are able to pull out of the ground. I want to repeat that. This is the 5th consecutive year. This isn't a blip on the radar. It's what we call a structural deficit. The world is effectively consuming its savings account of silver, and that balance is dropping faster and faster every year. Okay, to truly understand the tension that's building, we have to talk about the market's 2 separate realities. It's almost schizophrenic. First, you have physical silver, the actual metal, the heavy bars sitting in a vault that you can touch and hold. Then you have paper silver. These are financial contracts, ETFs, futures, all of them just promises to deliver the metal. And here is the absolutely crucial point. Credible sources suggest that for every single ounce of real physical silver that actually exists, there are anywhere from 100 to maybe 400 paper claims stacked on top of it. It's an inverted pyramid of promises resting on a tiny speck of reality.
There is a perfect analogy for this situation: a giant game of musical chairs. For years, even decades, the music has been playing. Paper contracts trade back and forth between banks and funds. Billions of ounces are exchanged on screens every day, and everything seems perfectly normal. But what's been happening behind the scenes, almost unnoticed, is that the real-world industrial users, the solar panel makers, the car companies, have been quietly walking into the room and taking physical chairs away. They're taking the actual silver out of the vaults, and now many market watchers believe the music is about to stop. And when it does, everyone holding a paper claim is going to look around for a chair, and they're going to realize there aren't nearly enough to go around.
So, this combination, a growing physical shortage on one hand and a massively leveraged paper market on the other, it creates an incredibly fragile situation. It's a house of cards. So that leads us to the big question, the one we started with.
have we ever seen this specific pattern play out before in history? And the answer to that is a clear and resounding yes. History provides us with a startlingly clear roadmap. In fact, 3 times over the last century, a very similar set of conditions, usually a monetary crisis that forces a rush into physical assets, has led to a sudden and dramatic repricing of silver.
Let's look at the record. In 1933, right after the U.S. government confiscated private gold, people turned to silver, and its price nearly tripled. Then in 1971, a huge moment, when the U.S. completely severed the dollar's link to gold, silver began an incredible run that saw its price multiply by a factor of 37. And most recently, in 2008, right in the heart of the global financial crisis, silver quintupled, a 5x move in just 3 years. The pattern is undeniable. Major financial disruptions send people scrambling for real, tangible assets, and silver is at the top of that list.
But here is perhaps the most concerning observation when you look at that historical data. The cycles, they seem to be getting faster. They're compressing. What took 9 years to play out in the 1970s took only 3 years after the 2008 crisis. The entire process, from the start of the crisis to the peak in silver's price, appears to be speeding up.
Now, that compression of time is absolutely critical. It suggests that when the next major event unfolds, it can happen much, much faster than most people expect. Which brings us right back to today. The historical patterns are like echoes. They're rhymes. But what tangible evidence do we have that the scramble for physical silver is happening right now in real time? Well, the signs are everywhere if you just know where to look. For instance, China, which for years was a huge importer of silver, suddenly flipped and started exporting massive amounts from its dwindling stockpiles. In London, the lease rates, that's basically the interest rate to borrow physical silver, reportedly spiked to record highs, a classic sign of a severe shortage. We heard reports of traders using expensive air freight to ship silver, which signals extreme urgency. And then, perhaps most telling of all, the U.S. government itself officially designated silver a critical mineral, putting it in the same category as materials essential for national security.
And just look at the COMEX exchange, which is the world's primary marketplace for metals futures. Right now, there are reportedly over 800 million ounces worth of paper promises to deliver silver. But sitting in the vaults available to actually back those promises is only about 40 million ounces of physical metal. That's a leverage ratio of 20 to 1. Think about that. If just 5% of those contract holders, just 1 in 20, decided they wanted the real thing instead of cash, the system could face an immense, perhaps impossible challenge.
So given everything we've discussed, where could this all be headed? Well, based on these powerful supply and demand dynamics, some market analysts are projecting what they call a base case of $90 to $100 per ounce by the middle of 2026. However, in a more extreme scenario, let's say a delivery failure on the COMEX exchange or major governments imposing export bans to keep the metal for themselves, those same projections climb to a range between $120 and $170 an ounce. But to give all those future price targets some real-world context, I want you to look at this number, $178. What is that? Well, that is the inflation-adjusted price of silver's all-time high back in 1980. In today's money, that's where silver has already been. It really makes you start to wonder if today's price isn't some sort of ceiling, but rather a floor that's been artificially held down for decades. In the end, it may all come down to this one simple, unavoidable truth. You can print contracts. You can create complex derivatives. You can trade paper back and forth all day long. But you cannot print the physical metal itself. A real physical shortage doesn't care one bit about the price on a computer screen. If there's no metal available to deliver, the paper game eventually has to end.
So let's recap. We've seen an 86% drain from the Shanghai vaults. We've seen 5 straight years of structural deficits. We've seen the clear historical echoes of 1933, 1971, and 2008. The exact same pattern has appeared 3 times before. And so the only question that remains is this: are we about to watch it complete a 4th? Before we conclude, please remember that the content presented here is for informational and educational purposes only. It is not and should not be considered financial or investment advice. You should always conduct your own research and consult with a professional before making any investment decisions. You are solely responsible for the choices you make.